Hello students, my name is Shayan Mitra. I am the faculty member of Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering of Greater Kolkata College of Engineering and Management. Today's topic is about the embedded system, in which this is the lecture number 26 that we are going to talking about, and the code name is EC703B. Okay, and in this lecture number 26, we are going to describe what is the WiseNet is. Okay, and how it related to what is the function of WiseNet and how it works, what is the purpose of using a WiseNet, what is the advantage and the disadvantage, and how it has been related to the embedded system architecture. Okay, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so WiseNet, the full form of is wireless sensor network. Okay, so WiseNet, the full form of WiseNet is wireless sensor network. So it has been this is the acronym of wireless sensor network is WiseNet. So the topics we are going to discuss in this lecture, and if possible in the next lecture, what is the WiseNet, how does it works, and what is the basic goals of it. So the first overview of WiseNet will be about the introduction, what is WiseNet is, what is the design goals, the system description, the software components, the hardware design, the power consumption, the application and future scope, and the conclusion. So these are the total overview that we are going to discuss. These are the footnotes or the points that I'm going to discuss one by one. Okay, so let's begin with the discussion. So first of all, the definition of WiseNet. What is WiseNet means? WiseNet means basically it's a one second. Okay, so let's begin with the video. Is that the introduction is the WiseNet is a wireless network that monitors the environment conditions such as light, temperature, and humidity. Okay, so the basic functionality of a WiseNet is to monitors the environment conditions such as light, temperature, and humidity. Next one is what is the modes, the MOTES modes. This network is comprised of nodes called modes that form an ad hoc network to transmit this data to a computer that function as a server. Okay, so the now if according to the definition, what is it really trying to imply here is that this network is basically is an ad hoc network to transmit this data to a computer that functions as a server. Okay, so all this data, so the first function of WiseNet is to monitors the data, monitors the environment conditions. So all the environment parameters that have been considered will be monitored. So if we monitored all the data, if we monitors all the environmental conditions, we will have n numbers of data. So all those data will be transmitted to a computer that functions as a server. So all those functions, all the parameters that has been recorded throughout a day or week or month, all those data will be delivered or transmit to a computer that is known as a server. All the data that has been monitored, it will be monitored by WiseNet, and the data that are being recorded will be provided to a computer that has act as a server, and where all those the network this comprised of the nodes is called the modes, for that basic purpose of transmitting all those data to a computer which act as a server. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now the second slide is saying that how does WiseNet work. Okay, the first point is the server stores the data in a database where it can later be retrieved and analyzed via a web-based interface. Okay, the network works successfully with an implementation of sensor mode. These are the important point. The second point is here the network works successfully with an implementation of a sensor mode. So it use the modes, those are basically defined in the previous page, that the modes basically are the nodes of a network. So all those nodes of the network has comprised of sensors or comprised of sensor, those are basically implemented to process all the data that has been retrieved or basically collected by the WiseNet. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now this involves third point is this involves selecting the hardware, designing the modes, and porting TinyOS. Okay, so we will discuss the TinyOS, how it works and what is basically TinyOS is. Once the platform is completed and TinyOS was ported to it, the next stage is to use this platform to create a small scale system of wireless network sensor. Okay, so we're going to get to this point uh, uh, in a short time. Okay, so now the point is what is the advantage and what is the need of using a WiseNet. Now the smart environment represent the next evolutionary development step in building utilities, industrial, home, shipboard and transportation system automation. Okay, the importance of a sensor networks is highlighted by the number of program, military program and NSF program announcements. They may work in interior of a large machinery and the bottom of an ocean, inside a twister, in a battlefield, in a home, in a large building, or be attached to animals. Okay, so basically the definition, through the definition we can understand that the basic advantage or the use of a WiseNet is basically, suppose in a military facility, in a home, to predict according to the environment. According to the environment, we can predict the future. Practically, the basic advantage of using a WiseNet or the purpose of using a WiseNet is to predict the future. Depending upon the wind speed, depending upon the temperature, the humidity, each and everything will provide us the data, and after processing all those data, we can conclude what will come after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 100 minutes, 5 hours or days in the future. What will be the atmosphere will be, and through that senses, through those data of environment, we can predict any kind of calamities such as nuclear attack or any kind of environmental hazard or any kind of natural disaster. We can calculate, or we can sense all those, or we can predict all the future depending upon the present data that has been collected using the monitors and the sensors. So these are the basic nature and the feature of the WiseNet, and that is the reason why we use WiseNet as a, and it's basically a very useful tool that has been it has a vast usefulness in different categories, different field of life. So here it is. So let's go to the next slide. Now another one is the design goals. Use of commercial off-the-shelf software and standard interface where applicable. Apache web server, this is a HTTP web server, MySQL database, these have been used to design such kind of system. That's the basic purpose of. Now we are going to get into that, we are deep diving into the system, the designs that has been used to collectively establish or standardize the basic functionalities of WiseNet. Okay, so the Apache web server is a HTTP function, MySQL database, PHP web programming language. These are basically tools that has been used to design the WiseNet. Okay, the simple web-based user interface that is required. A battery-powered wireless sensor nodes. Those are basically modes are also been required. Low power consumption, long battery life is required. Modes create self-organizing ad hoc networks for robust communication. These are the tools or components that is required to create or design a WiseNet. Next one is the system description. There are two subsystems in WiseNet. First one is primary subsystems, in which data analysis and data acquisition performed. Okay, so in primary subsystems, the data analysis part and the data acquisition part will be taken place. Okay, second one is the system component. System components are the client, the server. The server means the data that has been monitored or that has been recorded will be transmitted to a computer which act as a server. Basically, it's a database where the data has all been stored and analyzed. Okay, so this is the server. And the sensor mode network. According to the sensor mode network, it act depending upon the data which has been recorded and analyzed. Okay, and the client part is where all the data that has been processed has to be reported on. Okay, these are the three steps. So let's go to the next slide. Now first, the what you have described in the previous page of the primary subsystems. Now the first part of the subcategory of primary subsystem is the data analysis. The data analysis, this subsystem is software only, relied on exist internet and web infrastructure to provide communication between client and server components. Third one is selectively present collected environment data to end user in a graphical manner. It's easy to understandable that first one, the subsystem, this subsystem is software only, relied on exist internet and web infrastructure to provide communication between client and server components. Selectively present collected environment data to end user in a graphical manner. That's the important point. It means the monitors data, all those data that has been monitored through weeks or months, whoever knows how much time it is required, how much data is need to be retrieved or collected. Depending upon that, amount of data has been stored or analyzed or recorded. Depending upon the function it is need to be performed, depending on those data. So depending upon the system that is required to be operated, the system in which on which the all the analysis has been operated on, depending upon that the data has been collected. So suppose there is a system which requires 2 days data, some needs 10 days data, some needs 10 months data, some needs a few years data. That could be possible depending upon the system on which all those data, the analyzed data will be fed onto. So depending upon that, all the environmental data will be collected, and all those data are being provided to the end user as in a graphical manner. That's the important point. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Next one is the data acquisition part, is that collect and store environmental data for later processing by the data analysis subsystem. This is a mix of both PC and embedded system software as well as embedded system hardware. It is composed of both server and moat network components. That's the important point. The data acquisition part composed of both server and moat network components. So both have its functionalities to be carried on the acquisite data. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. System components. Okay, another part is the client. Now the client part, how it works. The standard web browser and via internet. Okay, any computer with a web browser and internet access could be a client. It's served only as a user interface to the data analysis subsystem. Any computer with a web browser and internet access could be a client. That's the important point. Any computer with a web browser and internet access could be a client. That's the important point to be remembered. It's served only as a user interface to the data analysis subsystem. Only act as the server only act as a user interface. Okay, it only stores the data. Okay, so the picture here showing is that this is the user, this is the request web page, this is the client, this is the input output part, this is the server requested web page. So client will request the data that has been stored in the server to fed to them. So this is the request web page will be transferred from the server to the client, and vice versa, depending upon the amount of data is required to be taken care of. The client will request to the server to will request the web. So the transfer of data will be on both sides. Okay, so and the same will be also applicable for the user part. So the server will is the place where all the data that has been monitored, or all the data that has been collected are stored in a part its name as server. In a computer, large computers where all the data can be stored. So the client will process all those data that has been stored in the server, and depending upon that, in the user interface it will provide the graphical compositions, or the graphical all the user interface will be a graphical manner. So the data that has been collected can be seen in a proper perfect manner where it could be analyzed again. Okay, so these are the points. Okay, so there's a client part, there's a server part, and there's a user. All the data that has been processed will be provided to the user via client. The client will provide all those data. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Second one is a system composition. Now this part is the description of server. What has been said here is that Critical components that link between the data acquisition and data analysis subsystems. That's the important part. Critical component that link between the data acquisition and the data analysis subsystem. It means server is the point where the the stored or the recorded or the monitored data will be saved, and from that server part the analysis of the data has been started. So server worked as the link for data acquisition and data analysis. Okay, on the data analysis side, is an HTTP server hosting a web application. On the data analysis side is an HTTP server hosting a web application. When a page request comes in, the HTTP server calls the web application, which retrieves the data from the SQL database, process it, and returns a web page which the HTTP server serves to the client. So this is the basic steps that has been taken to perform all these operations. Now a simple steps that has been taken here. How? That first there will be a page request that will come through the HTTP server, calls the web application. So HTTP server hosting a web application. When a page request comes in, okay, when the page request comes in, the HTTP server calls the web application, which retrieves the data from the SQL database. So the SQL database will always store the monitored data, the environmental data that has been storing for since we don't know, for years, for months, depending on the system that is in which the amount of data that is required to be analyzed. So depending upon that, the data will be monitored, and according to that, amount of data will be stored in those databases. And depending upon the request, if the request comes in, the HTTP server calls the web application, which retrieves the data from the SQL database. The web application will retrieve the data from the SQL database, process it. So the web application, the HTTP server hosting a web application, so the server hosts the web application. So that web application is the thing which process the data. The data will be retrieved from the SQL database. It will send to the web application. Through that web application, all the data that has been retrieved will be processed, and then it's returned to the web page. It will return to the web page in which the request had been occurred. Okay, so and returns the web page which the HTTP server serves to the client. So client will generate the request. According to the request, the HTTP server calls the web application. The web application retrieves the data from the SQL database and process it, and it returns to the web page which the HTTP server serves to the client. So through the HTTP server, the result of the request will be served. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now the system description of the system components. First one, the server. This is the picture where this is the client, this is the server. The web page request will comes from the client part. Now the data packets through the sensor network will come to the server, and the via gateway mode the sensor network will also goes away from the server point. So the web program flow will be I have described in the last page. The web program flow has been drawn here. The first one is the client request for data with constraints, or you could say that conditions. So check for valid condition parameter or constraint parameters. So as soon as the client requests for data with conditions, the validation of the condition parameter or constraint parameters will be validated. The next step will be the data will be retrieved from the database, where we have considered the SQL database, from which all this data has been served to the web application, and through that web application all the data has been processed, and all those processed data will provided to the HTTP server, through which the request has been come using a web page. Okay, so here the client requests for data with constraints. Is it a valid constraint parameters or not? It will be checked. If it is not, the process will not go on. If it is processed, if it is valid, then the flow will continue. The data will be retrieved from the database, and subject to client's constraints. Next one is create the web page will be created with requested data, and the return to web page to client. This is the web program overflow program flow that I have already described. Okay, this is the uh, web program flow. It will help you to understand that what I have described here in a single format. Okay, let's go to the next slide. System description. System components. Okay, first one is the sensor modes. It is the component responsible for collecting raw environmental data and transmitting that data to the server. It is the component responsible for collecting raw environmental data and transmitting that data to the server. So this is the factual thing. Server PC commands, sensor mode, sensor network, input output. Okay, so the server PC, the diagram flow of the server PC will be sensor mode, sensor network. This is the input output part. The sensor networks, this is the data packets that will be entered into the part, and this is the sensor network where the data packet will be get out from the modes network. These are the flow diagram. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is the system description, system block diagram. We will provide you the all diagram proposition here, and after that we'll end this lecture. Okay, up to this. So the first part here is the client part, where the internet is the most important feature that is needed to be present. This is the TCP/IP protocol that has been maintained here. This is the system, and this is the web browser through which, using the internet and TCP/IP protocol, the system will provide you the request through the web browser. Okay, and the server part, and this is the sensor mode network. In the sensor mode network, this is the gateway part, where all the offices will get the data, okay, depending upon the request. So this is the server part, where this is the HTTP server through which the request will be generated, and through this HTTP server, through this web program, this is the SQL database. So depending upon the web, through the web browser, the system will through the internet TCP/IP protocol, the internet will generate the request. Depending upon the request, the HTTP server call the web application, and the SQL database, from the SQL database basically the data will be retrieved, and the web application will process all those data, and this is the wireless database through, and all this data through the gateway will be provided to the different kind of offices, and the data, where the data are required, the process data, where all the process data are required, will be provided to the offices. Okay, so this sensor mode network will have these the nodes where the sensors are actually resides, and where the database, where the data are analyzed. Okay, and depending upon different kind of analyzed data, all those data are being retrieved through the WiseDB SQL database, web program, HTTP internet server. The data, the request or the inquiry, the result of the inquiry will be provided to the web browser. Okay, so this is the proper data flow diagram through which all the system will be work. So this part is basically the data analysis subsystem, and this part is the data acquisition subsystem. Okay, here the data, the subsystem where the data has been analyzed, and this is the part where the data has been the data acquisition has been taken place. So in this part, all the data are being retrieved and stored in the SQL database. Here the request will be generated from the client part, and the request will be sent through the HTTP server and to the SQL database. The data has been retrieved and processed using the web application, which has been hosted by the HTTP server. The required result will be provided through the internet to the requested page. So this is the basic block diagram. Okay, so here we will end today's lecture. Next lecture, the lecture number 27, we will continue with this description of WiseNet, and probably we will conclude the WiseDB or WiseNet in the next lecture. Okay, thank you.